everyone. Welcome back to our Market Pulse series for HR. Today, we thought we would talk a little bit about the state of HR analytics. And I'm excited to pull for you today some poll questions and results that we took from a poll that was done rather recently on the topic. And instead of our usual one question format, it actually had a number of questions embedded in it, but they're all pretty interrelated. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about two things. We're going to talk about some of the positive responses and things that we're seeing happening and trending in the market from this poll, and then also talk about some of the improvement opportunities. Let me turn this over to Stacy, maybe. And Stacy, why don't you start with the with a couple of the items and the questions and what we saw as positive things happening here in the area of HR analytics.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Julie. So I think, just in general, as it relates to HR analytics, I think, as we come out of, time around challenges with kind of health, economic challenges, and organizations are really working through the impacts to, to their productivity, to, some of their constrained budgets and how they do more with less, and just adapting, to the level of change that's going on within organizations. And, we're finding they need to make a lot of quick decisions. So overall, in general, I'd say, just the need to make kind of better, faster, smarter decisions. It's gone from, organizations that, it used to be kind of a differentiator for those that were, trying to really leverage HR analytics and get ahead, to something now that I think in general we're seeing it's just a critical business activity for all organizations to be doing. And so I think in general we've seen good progress in the area of data and analytics. I think with the increasing, shift to SaaS, organizations have been able to move in many cases, kind of more, from their disparate landscape and technology to more of a single source of HR data. And increasingly, I think we're seeing that analytics, are being embedded in terms of a lot of the, day-to-day HR processes. So whether it's, the organizational kind of planning or performance management or talent reviews or comp planning, we are seeing it, embedded more in HR processes. I think it's a very positive sign that, here in our survey shows almost 40% of organizations said that they're very successful in fostering a data-driven culture in HR. And then approximately another quarter of respondents had said they were somewhat, moderately successful. So those numbers, were not as high a year ago. So I think, positive results there. Organizations, we find they are collecting more data. They're putting data in the hands of HR and HR business partners. And I think with some of the improvements in HR analytics, we've seen the increased appetite, really for data within the broader organization. So leaders are really wanting to see increasing levels of, sophistication. They're wanting to kind of get deeper, and they're wanting the ability to drill down into a lot more detailed analysis. So, so the appetite is definitely there. So I think that's some of the good news that that I see when I look at this.
Yeah, that's
so Julie, it would be great to share your perspective as well.
Yeah, it's no small deal either, right? So the top question and the bottom question both show some of those very positive things you're talking about. What struck me in these results is that providing direct access, that speaks to the fundamental cultural challenge of how we use data and the fact that it's here to stay. So just moving from a reports mindset with roles that are dedicated to kind of creating and pushing stuff out, it is not really the emphasis any longer. Instead, we're looking at organizations that are trying to focus on direct access and dashboards and drill downs where employees, managers, HR folks are pulling down the data and accessing the data that they need. So everyone's, kind of expected to do that. And I think that speaks to this cultural change and the success that we're seeing in the poll. It's a big thing. And it's a skill that has to be developed, unless you are one of those few folks that happen to have an admin who can figure it out and, and pull some things down for you. The other thing that I thought when I saw the positives here was fewer organizations are really struggling, it seems, with being able to measure and observe. So most of them have data, and the metrics are are expected, and the HR systems and tools are there, and they're feeding that need. So initially you identify and track, some really big things, right? Early on, you're focused on self-service adoption, and are we driving work down the funnel? We're also focused on inquiry channels and satisfaction, and maybe a third big area that folks focus on with data and analytics is issue resolution or case closure, or just counts of everything that's happening. And as we stabilize and folks kind of get this skill and these tools under their belt, we hear clients asking different questions, new questions like, hey, I produce data and metrics every week or every month, but what does good look like? So, am I measuring the right stuff, right? On the other hand, and both of these things are really looking at more of an outside in perspective. So something that you can compare to, and insights that also tell you what other organizations are doing with their data analytics and how to think about incorporating some of those into their own metrics. A third big, question that I hear organizations now asking as they start to get, hit their groove with analytics is, what should I be reporting and to which audience? So here's an example. Once I've transitioned to the cloud for HCM, I focus on driving and showing adoption or access channels, right? And then you kind of hit green, and you have 70 or 80%, of activity driven down to your direct access channels. And so then, do you really need leaders that are looking at incremental movements, each week on one side or the other of that, or is there something else that becomes, more insightful? And so that's how the conversation's changing. And Stacey, actually, I think that leads to it's a really good segue to talk about the couple of poll questions in the middle that show us a little bit more the improvement opportunity. So let me flip it back to you and have you, share your insights on those.
Yeah, I agree, with what you shared. And I think, certainly while we've seen, these advancements in analytics, the data here in the middle, does show that kind of plenty of opportunity remains. And so I think as one area, establishing those enterprise-wide HR metrics. So, here it says over 40% say they have not been successful at doing that. So I think, many organizations we find have not established just common data definitions and what is the, standard reporting that we can agree upon in terms of, across the organization, and the standard metrics that we should be prioritizing and tracking, and all that is really kind of critical just to establishing, scale. So while when they're not common data definitions and there isn't a consistent kind of foundation across the organization, it's also harder just to have common interpretation of those results, and to tell the story that can help put the data into action, that you were talking about. And that other area here is, significant opportunity still around the predictive analytics. So, over half say that they are not successful in using predictive analytics to drive actions. So, where we do see predictive analytics being used, it's primarily in the areas such as kind of predicting headcount or turnover, and some maybe, key strategies around retention. So it may be the basic, turnover stats, but it's not that next step to say, to tie it to the business results. So not just what will the turnover be, but how does, increased turnover impact my, sales result, and by how much? Or not just what is the employee sentiment, but how do we improve employee engagement, by 15% so we can increase satisfaction or profits by 3%. It's that next step of how do we take action based on, the information that we're seeing. And most organizations we find are not kind of forecasting, their talent needs, not necessarily providing insights to make sure they've got the right skills and capabilities for the future, or really linking a lot of that planning to the business planning. So I think there's a huge interest in this area to do that, but I think, today, current state is it remains, some pretty significant gaps there. So I think, certainly the desire for data, is now high, but the ability to kind of surface that data, and insights and quickly deliver that to the business and then use that to drive actions to create that business impact is where the gaps are. So
yeah, it's definitely what people are talking about, right?
Exactly.
That's what leaders want to know. Well, when I was thinking about some thoughts on the improvement opportunities, I actually, put them out here on a next slide. And I don't know whether we kind of talk to this as trends, innovations, challenges, but some of the top discussion points or the top areas that I find folks looking at and exploring in the area of HR reporting and data and analytics, I put forth here, right? So the first challenge is kind of going beyond basic operational metrics. So, as you get to the point where you can actually track and measure things and you can see them hopefully in a single instance, you can actually get headcount and you can get some other things all together in one place, then priorities start to shift. And, we need to challenge ourselves to look more at identifying things, problem areas, or seeing things that are ripe for optimization, kind of diagnosing a little bit what's going on in the environment. Another thing to, kind of poke at and press yourself to do is to balance the use of the HR systems and tools. So, you have a core. Often many folks get to the point where they have a core HCM, they have Experience Suite, you have automation. They all provide different insights. They're all used in different ways. But how are you going to look at your processes and use each of those tools in your tool belt accordingly, to tweak and refine and improve, the operational environment? And the third one in this area of kind of going beyond the basics of your operational metrics and dashboards is really looking at how you can develop those and use those differently for different audiences, right? So leaders want to see one thing, the business units want to see another, your HR, staff need to see other sorts of views. And so thinking about dashboards in a more robust fashion to bring the right data to the right audience is something that, we see folks evolving into as well. A second area that I would call out to people is just continuously evaluate the multimodal access and experience. So, there's web and mobile are, becoming table stakes. There's social, there's voice channels, and, kind of fine tuning all of the different modes of access and experience is something that, that bears refinement, and it impacts the experience, which is what everyone is looking to improve upon and optimize. So using our reporting and our data to help do that is a really effective use once you've been stable and kind of know how to count things. The third one that I put forward is just embedding proactive service delivery. So, a lot of these tools and technologies allow you to set up things like nudging or, leading workflows, one workflow that leads to the other, or embedded automations that take things a step further and allow you to interact with the decision points and have some of the grunt work, automated underneath the scenes, or even pushing, dashboard views based on, something that's flashing red or flashing yellow. And so serving those things up proactively to users, whether it's managers or senior leadership or HR, is something that is a really useful next step or next thing to do with your analytics activities. And then the final one that I would put out there is just, we're moving from flat customer satisfaction surveys after a call or a point in time, very, I'll call them flat measures, to an opportunity for increased routine, regular feedback in the form of real-time pulse insights, or, liking or disliking content that would tell you, was this useful? Was it not useful? And that's a much more detailed feedback. Perception and sentiment tools that help you understand, what the underlying tones are of satisfaction without having to ask for a numerical, figure on a survey, or even page and click metrics from tools like Qualtrics and others, right? That tell you how long people are looking or where they're navigating and what's dragging their attention and what's being used versus what's really not being used. Those sorts of innovations and building those things in are kind of the next step, right? The next step in getting closer to those analytics you were talking about that are not quite prime time yet.
Yeah, no, there's great innovation in the space right now. We're certainly seeing analytics as a growing, area of investment, in the market, whether it is kind of the HCM analytics or the standalone HR analytic point solutions or some of the strategic workforce planning tools. I think there's a lot out there that's kind of echoes that bottom line of it's no longer just kind of viewed as a nice to have, but really a critical, business activity. And then I think even beyond the technology, the area, that you touched upon earlier around the fact that it's also, using data to drive actions requires a change to how the leaders and the managers operate, right? So empowering the managers in those organizations to use the analytics for better decision making and, generating kind of new ways of working and new skills and really position them to embed those analytics into their daily work and take advantage of the new analytic capabilities.
Cool. Great conversation. In fact, I can't wait to put this out to the group in our digital HR connections group, see if we can drum up some conversation and maybe we'll get a chance to gather some more insights and talk about data analytics and getting to predictive stuff another time in the future. Thanks, Stacey.
Sounds great. Thank you.